Your time has expired. Senator Canavan.
Oh, thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. This is all a bit embarrassing for the Labor Party today. We have a shadow treasurer who doesn't understand or doesn't know what the tax-free threshold is. We have a former treasurer still in the parliament responsible for racking up $240 billion in debt in 6 years while we didn't have a recession, and now we're left with a legacy of it. But now it's starting to all make sense because the Labor Party cannot read a simple chart that is included in today's major business newspaper, along with the report that they're trumping here as some kind of scandal. Both Senator Khedda and Senator Singh have said it's shock horror scandal that 30% of locations, or they're actually a statistical area 2, is what they've used in this report, which is an ABS statistical area. There's a third of those locations are in recession at the moment. Well, you'd think when you heard a stat like that, which is a pretty unusual stat, it's not something common that is referred to, you'd want to look at, you want to think about, is that high or low relative to normal times? Is that high or low? Well, there's actually, helpfully, a chart which does that for them. In the Financial Review, they don't have to read the report. It's there in the Financial Review article online. It's right there. And the data goes back to financial year 2002, very helpfully. And it actually shows that the peak in terms of areas in recession was just slightly, but slightly higher under the Labor government. Under the Labor government in financial year 2011, there were more locations in recession than there are today. And it also shows that going back over that 12-year period, well, usually there's something more than a fifth of locations in recession at any one time, which is what you'd expect in a dynamic economy. Things change, markets change, prices change. Some areas do it tougher than others. Our job is to have a proper and seamless and flexible economy in place and policies in place to help those adjustments occur. But that's always the case. Now, it was actually much, much lower under the Howard government. The last Howard government had areas in recession of these 2,214 areas, all between 20 and 30%. 20 and 30%. Now, it did increase after the GFC, after the global financial crisis. Under the Labor government, it increased to over 30%. And I'm not here trying to necessarily blame the Labor Party for that, like these guys are stupidly doing. I'm not saying it's all their fault, because obviously there were other things that impacted our economy at those times, and clearly since those times we have not been able to grow as strong as an economy as we'd like. We'd still have moderate growth, it's an increasing amount of growth, but we still have more work to do. The other really embarrassing thing in this graph is they've tried to hang so much off this graph, which actually the data in this report, as you'd expect, because we're actually not finished, financial year 2015, the data finishes last financial year. They've only got data up to last financial year. Now that means that they're trying to pass judgment on the Abbott Trust's newly elected coalition government based on 9 months, of that government, from September 2013 through to mid-2014. That's the only period in that time where the Abbott government has actually been in charge or in power. There was not a budget delivered by that government in that time. The budget was previously the former government's budget. But they are trying to hang all this off. Their whole argument today, is based off 9 months from the Abbott Trust government. It's based off a comparative chart which actually shows that things were better the last time the coalition government than when Labor were in government, and now they're trying to say shock horror scandal to the entire country. And it just shows that these guys are running out of ideas. They are running out of ideas. They are running out of arguments. They don't quite know what to do now since the budget has been put down, and they're scatterbrained all over the place today in question time with different questions on different topics. And they've had to choose this one because it was the only one in the paper today they thought they could give a run, and it's embarrassing for them. The other thing I just want to say is about this notion that somehow $1 in $5 comes from 10 locations, and again, this is apparently shock horror. Well, that's increased over the last 12 years. It's increased from, and I don't think the Labor Party sometimes can read y-axes because it's not zero in this chart. It's increased from 16.5 to 17.9 over the last 12 years. Massive, massive change. But the other thing to take away from that is, of course, most of it's concentrated because the people in Australia are concentrated. 2/3 of Australians live in capital cities. But only around a fifth of them here, at least in those 10 locations, are producing the wealth. So they're actually underperforming. Our capital cities are not punching above their weight because we all know that most of our export dollars and most of our wealth in this country is generated in regional areas where only 1/3 of the Australian people live. But all our iron ore exports, all our coal, all our agricultural products, most of our tourism assets are actually in regional areas, and that's what produces the wealth for this country.
Thank you, Senator